The Seahawks have one of the most talented 1-2 punches in the backfield in the NFL, but that didn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet last year. Can the Seahawks revive their run game? We're going to be breaking it all down here on a special Thursday episode of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined for today's episode by my co-host, Connor Benintendi, and we're going to be breaking down Seattle's run game with a very special guest. A special thanks to all the 12s out there as always. Thank you, whether you're listening in from West Seattle or across the ocean in London. Thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Training camp 5 days away. Technically, the rookies have already started the festivities, but the first open practice will be coming up next week. We're only 5 days away, and we're going to wrap up our training camp storylines, taking a look at Seattle's run game, and then we'll dive into our 90-man countdown as we get into the top 10 players on Seattle's 90-man roster. With this episode coming your way courtesy of FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down or end completely. The sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we saved our best for last here on our Seahawks training camp storyline series. We've now had 8 different guests that have come on and graced their presence here on Locked On Seahawks. But this is a special one because, you know, those of you that aren't in the media room, which is most of you, but the media room, there's one particular guy that can get under your skin a little bit and make you want to pull your hair out. But the good news is that Mazvita Marier and I both are pretty good for that because, well, there's no hair left for either one of us to pull out. So we're excited to have Mazvita here from Cascadia Sports, breaking down Seattle's run game. How are you, good sir?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. And yeah, exactly. That media room is small enough. And is it CJ Connor? You kind of heard it, but I'm telling you, you know, Corbin, he dishes it, but he takes it, but he dishes it out. So we have quite the ongoing, on a daily basis. You think the training camp or practice is a battle. That media room is quite, I would say, it's primal, if you will.
It's pretty intense in that media room, especially when people are battling for the food when they bring it in up front. But nonetheless, we keep things interesting in that media room. But I will say this. This is a perfect segue into what we're going to be talking about. I think last year that our media room had more fight than what the offensive line in the run game had for the Seattle Seahawks. And, I mean, really, Maz, this was a 28th ranked rushing attack in the NFL. That is not a number that Pete Carroll had to be happy about. This new coaching staff coming and looking at things. Look at the running backs that we've got here. So the essential question here to kick off this segment: can the Seahawks, after everything that went wrong last year with the run game, you name it, it went wrong with this group, and that was one of the big reasons they dropped to 17th in scoring. Can the Seahawks finally take advantage of the immense talent that they have in the backfield in Ryan Grubb's offense?
Yes and no, right? I don't know out of the first 8 guests you had, but whoever talked about the offensive line, it's going to depend on an offensive line that plays decent. They don't have to play great, but to your point, because this is a talented backfield. And if they can do that, if you get an offensive line that's relative healthy, I think the Seahawks are poised to improve on their ranking from last year. That is in the run game. So yes, I think they will, given what Ryan Grubb, his ability to kind of be creative. We saw that at the University of Washington, how he uses the running back. Unpredictable, right? And the key to a good running game is that it's you run when you can, right? You don't let the defense dictate that. You run I would say if you can run and are successful when you are, then you're moving the chains quite a bit. And I think the Seahawks have a good chance of doing that.
Yeah, and I think one of the bigger things, as you mentioned, obviously Washington and Ryan Grubb, Maz. I'm curious on your opinion just regarding concepts in Ryan Grubb's offense in the run game. And what do you think are going to be some of the bigger differences between what Grubb is going to do this year and what Shane Waldron did last year? And then kind of as a double question here, do you think that Seattle's offensive line will be athletic enough to emulate kind of what Grubb did at Washington?
Yeah, and I covered the Huskies last year as well, and they run all the way, to that loss to Michigan. So to answer your question, Connor, I think that what he does is he does a lot of schemes. He does a lot of movement in the backfield. But, we had one of those closed door meetings with him, Ryan Grubb did, and he said, you know what, it isn't always all that motion. Sometimes it's just to see if the defense shifts or not. He's very innovative in terms of that. He'll put something out there. He'll put the little cheese out there, see if the rat comes out and get it. And if he doesn't, he'll move it around. And I think they will do that given the two running backs they have. I've told Corbin this. I really think Charbonnet is more geared for the Ryan Grubb offense than I think Ken Walker is. And we can delve into the numbers a little bit, but that's what I think will happen in terms of the concepts they'll run. I think they'll run Charbonnet wide, and he'll probably bring in Ken Walker on the inside. But you got to remember, Walker and Charbonnet can catch the ball. Their hands, they got pretty good hands. So that's what I think in their offensive line wise. They're young, right? And so we got to see what happens on this, at the center position, although Toomey, I think, is there. It's got to be Abe Lucas. Is Abe Lucas ready? And all signs says he's ready. His Instagram post says he's ready. So we'll see.
Yeah, that really is a perfect lead into what I was going to ask, because, look, we can talk Ken Walker III. We can talk Zach Charbonnet, and we're going to mention those guys a lot in the rest of this segment. But at the end of the day, Abraham Lucas, I believe, was the biggest issue last year with this run game, not having him healthy. And even when he was out there, you were at the games, just didn't have the same pop behind his pads. He was not as explosive out of his stance. That knee was really impacting his play negatively when he was out there. That's why he ended up missing the last couple of games at the end of the year, because he just wasn't right. How critical in your mind is Abraham Lucas when we're looking specifically at the run game? Obviously, you want to have him for pass protection too, but just how critical is that going to be? He's going to start on the PUP list. We learned that just before starting this show, but that was expected. How critical is it going to be to have him healthy in week one if they're going to want to get this run game revived?
Well, the answer is highly critical. Why? Because you need someone, you need a finisher in that offensive line. I think McDonald is going to create kind of this whole, and I should also say, the offensive line coach from Washington, he also did a really good job of creating finishers and offensive linemen that can move up the field. So mobility is going to be critical. I think it was a smart move to put him on the PUP list right now when he's ready, because you're going to need that. It's not going to be the jet sweep, student body right of the USC back in the day, whatnot, but you're going to need mobile, athletic offensive line that will finish the block 3 or 4 yards down the field to allow Walker and Charbonnet to get that extra yard. And we saw how Charbonnet, finishes the tackles, right? He had the angry run in week 3, and so he's an angry runner. Very critical, Corbin. Very, very critical.
Yeah, Corbin and I have talked a little bit about this on a previous podcast too, just about obviously what Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet kind of bring to the table just in general as running backs. But I'm curious, Maz, of your opinion specifically on Charbonnet, what you're expecting to see out of him in year 2. I am personally a huge fan of Zach Charbonnet. I just refer to him as a tank. He just runs through people. It's so much fun to watch. Ken Walker obviously is a much different back stylistically. What do you expect out of him in year 2, and how do you expect him to be utilized in this offense?
Yeah, last year he was one of 53 running backs with at least 100 carries in 2023, and he was ranked 40th in yards, but he was ranked 25th in success rate and 6th in explosive carry rate. as much as we think this guy is a tank, he is also very explosive. So how I see them using him is on third down and second down. I think he's going to take carries away from Ken Walker. I think Walker's going to be, your hammer, but Charbonnet's ability to read, I think his vision is a little bit better, and I think he runs more upright, so he's more shifty. I expect him to get more plays down the field and running a little bit wider than Ken Walker. That's not to say Ken Walker can't run wide. We saw him do that a couple games, but I think that Charbonnet's got that ability to go inside, bang, 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 then go outside. And then maybe on the next play, like Grub will do, is maybe shift him out there. And you think he's going to go inside and give him a little bit of a drop pass there, and down the screen he goes.
When we come back, we're going to continue diving into Seattle's run game, which is going to be instrumental to getting this team back to the playoffs with our special guest when we return here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode of Locked On Seahawks is brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. If you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Now that I'm back in the saddle as a site manager, LinkedIn Jobs is my go-to to post writing positions to land top candidates. It's made the process easy and seamless. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, and it's so easy. In fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive. It's quick. It's easy. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm live here with my co-host, Connor Benintendi. I'm Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined by our special guest, Mazvita Marier, joining us here to talk about Seattle's run game, which, quite frankly, it was disappointing as heck last year. 28th overall in the National Football League. And maybe this was the craziest part, Maz, is Seattle was dead last in the NFL in rushing yards per attempt in the red zone. So you want to know why this team couldn't finish drives? That seemed like a pretty big part of the equation. And I want to leapfrog off of Connor's question a little bit here, because you were talking about Zach Charbonnet, and Ken Walker III has been such an electric runner in his first 2 seasons. He was the second running back in Seahawks history in his rookie season to rush for over 1,000 yards 2 years ago. So he had a star turn as a rookie. He didn't get to that number last year, though. Where things are standing right now, you mentioned something, and I've actually asked a few other people on this show in recent weeks about this, and generally Ken Walker III has been the popular pick to hold on to his starting job, but you're the first person that I've heard that's mentioned, you know what, I wonder if Zach Charbonnet can maybe be nipping at Ken Walker III's heels a little bit. And you mentioned Ryan Grubb's offense, and Dylan Johnson last year ran for over 1,000 yards. Dylan Johnson is not a 4-3 guy. He is not a burner. He wasn't even drafted this year. He was really good in that offense, though, and just did the things Ryan Grubb wanted. What are the parallels that you were seeing there with Zach Charbonnet that suggest to you that not only is Charbonnet going to get more carries, he might potentially make things difficult for Ken Walker III to keep his starting job?
Well, here's a stat I found. First downs gained last year by the Seahawks, right? They had 46 rush. That was Ken Walker. Zach Charbonnet had 32. Third down conversions, 4 by Ken Walker, 8 by Zach Charbonnet. Fourth down conversions, 2 by Ken Walker, and 3 by Zach Charbonnet. I think this is closer than it looks. And to answer your question more succinctly, Corbin, I really think his ability to run between the tackles like Dylan Johnson did, because Ryan Grubb will wait, and then when it's ready, his play calling is so unique. We're going to see that. He's going to struggle, obviously, a little bit. But what he did with Dylan Johnson is that he would wait until that moment and pop him. And what I mean by that is on second down, and then on third down, try to run in between the tackles. That's why I think this race is closer than people think. Now, look, in all aspects, if I look over here, Walker first 26 starts. He actually, if you're looking at the stats, here's something I saw that was really interesting, is that Ken Walker has 16 rushing touchdowns, which is fifth best in Seahawks franchise in 26 starts. Sean Alexander, Derek Ferner, Kurt Warner, and Marshawn Lynch are the other ones. So, I mean, look, I don't think this is about Ken Walker not fulfilling or playing his potential. I just think it's more about the versatility of Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, and kind of adjacent to run game in general. And I'm curious, very curious on your thoughts on this, because both running backs were used pretty heavily in the pass game last year out of the backfield. But Zach Charbonnet got slightly more targets, had slightly more receptions, generally was a slightly more effective pass catcher at the running back position. How do you see that shaking out this year? Which one do you think is going to be a little bit more heavily involved in that area for Seattle?
I think Zach Charbonnet, just because I think what will happen is if they're going to create space there with Jackson Smith and Jigba up a little bit, and maybe we're looking at DK Metcalf actually spreading, going down the field. There's going to be that space, right, just outside, past the defensive linemen, right, inside between the linebackers. I think Charbonnet is going to be very successful in that slot over there. Now, him and Tyler, there's that zone that's open right there. And that's what I think Zach Charbonnet is going to earn the money. That's where he's going to be on the money down, is in that space behind the defensive linemen, a little bit even or just past beyond the linebackers. If they can suck him out of there, that space right there is where I think Zach Charbonnet will occupy. Not to say Ken can't do it, but I think Zach can do it on a more consistent basis.
And I think the other thing that's worth noting here is the pass protection aspect, because Ken Walker III, that is an area that he has continued to struggle. And so Seattle's going to want a more reliable person out there that can handle those duties. Zach Charbonnet has consistently been good at that, dating back to his time. There are variables that have to be considered there. But at the end of the day, and you hit on this early in the show with Abe Lucas and just talking about the struggles this team had last year, the offensive line has got to be better for this group to be able to take advantage of the talent they've got. Ken Walker III and Zach Charbonnet could start for a lot of teams in this league. They're talented running backs. They're versatile backs, as we've talked about with the pass catching, but they had so many issues with playing musical chairs on this offensive line last year, whether it was injuries, inconsistent performance. That right guard spot, you and I have been on the practice field this spring, and we've been talking about this position, and there's clearly now three guys in the mix. This is a three-man competition. Anybody that thinks McLennan Curtis is not part of this equation isn't paying attention. This is truly a three-horse race. But how much priority do you think the Seahawks should be putting into the run game when they're trying to make that decision who's going to win that job? Because Anthony Bradford, you think, have an advantage in that because he is a physical, mean player in the line of scrimmage. But the other two players you're talking about here can also pack a mean punch, and there might be more pass protection skill there. So how much priority are you putting in the run game if you're trying to make that decision and evaluate that position?
I mean, it's critical. It's vital. The stat last year, this is under Pete Carroll, right? When the Seahawks, when they rushed over 100 yards last year at 5 games, they won all 5 games. I mean, that to me, you're looking at a defensive-minded coach, an old, lunch pail bucket type of coach in McDonald. I think he's going to want to be able to run the ball. And to do that, you have to have a good offensive line that's in sync. I think players are going to have to step up. Although with Timmy, again, and Bradford, you need production. There's the one position I would say you need better than average production for the right guard. And I think that they're going to put an emphasis on it. Scott Huff, you were there, Corbin, in terms of we saw some unique drills he was doing with the offensive line, and when they let us watch the practices, I think they're well on their game plan to execute and get a offensive line that's in sync, athletic, and can finish the play.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge competition at that right guard spot, and that's going to be a huge influence on how effective this run game is going to be. Overall, though, you were talking earlier, Maz, about the mobility of offensive linemen at Washington. And I'm curious what you think Scott Huff and his influence is going to do for this offensive line, particularly in the run game. I mean, whenever he had offensive linemen pulling, those big boys were moving, and they moved well, and they hit their blocks, and they moved people out of the way. So how much do you think that can be attributed to Huff, and how much do you think that's going to kind of translate in his position with the Seahawks?
That's a great question. I think, Corbin, we saw this. That's why they got him. That's exactly why they went and got him in something. What we saw during the pre-training camp drills. I mean, he was doing some interesting teaching, and part of that was real basic. I sat there with Ray Roberts and I said, Ray, take me through this stuff. And he said, you know what? They're trying to simplify that offensive line. They're trying to simplify the assignments, but be in communication. And kind of when you do that, I think then we all know then the game comes easy. You're not thinking as fast, and it's really about execution. I really think that is why they went and got Scott Huff.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting addition to this coaching staff. And you and I did get to see, running the run fits and walk through with the quarterback and the running back, Ken Walker, Geno Smith over there. Like, those are things I had never seen done in an NFL practice. I certainly saw it at the high school level. You expect it there, but I'd never seen that at the NFL level. And quite frankly, that was something that I really enjoyed getting a chance to see, because you can see the emphasis and the technique. And they're not in pads anyway. You got to get the mental reps in that time of year. So really the pads, that's going to dictate things. Who's rocking people during training camp practices and preseason games. That'll be ultimately what dictates who's going to end up winning some of those jobs and hopefully opening up run lanes for Ken Walker III and Zach Charbonnet. Now, coming up next, Maz, we're going to be taking a trip into our 90-man countdown, and we had a couple players that I know that you are going to be really excited to share your thoughts on. We got 3 players we're going to be knocking out today. We're going to get to that up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the WNBA, at least for a few more days, and much more. You can bet on it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 win or lose. After setting a record for the most assists in a single game in WNBA history, has Caitlin Clark done enough to win Rookie of the Year, or is Angel Reese still in first place? Is controversial second-round pick Bronny James Jr. going to exceed expectations playing with his father in L.A.? Does Aaron Judge have another big home run stretch coming up for him, coming out of the All-Star break for the Yankees? You can bet on it all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com and add a big win to your summer bucket list today. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined by my co-host, Connor Benintendi. And we've got a very special guest here wrapping up our Seahawks training camp storyline series. Mazvita Marier coming in and joining us from Cascadia Sports. As I've said, really the instigator in the Seahawks media room. He would take the cake there. And I'm not much better, but that's why it's kind of dangerous when both of us are in the same media room together. But anyway, Maz, we are going to take a dip into the 90-man countdown, and we are now to the nitty-gritty. We are to the players that really are going to make an impact or expected to make an impact for this football team. And the first player on our countdown today, I know this is somebody that you were very excited got brought back in free agency, and was somebody that some of us, including myself, didn't know if the Seahawks were going to bring him back. Noah Fant, you know this offense for Ryan Grubb really well, covering Washington last year. And I think one of the underrated narratives coming out of Washington was just how important the tight ends were to really putting that passing game together. The receivers got all the attention, but Jack Westover, Devin Culp had really good numbers catching the football last year. And there's a reason they brought back Noah Fant. Ryan Grubb had a big voice in that. So what is your expectation for Noah Fant? No touchdowns last year, 32 catches. It was not a great season, and yet he's been efficient when he's had his opportunities.
Yeah, I think he was injured. I do. I think he was hampered by an injury. So you're looking at a former first-round draft pick, by the Denver Broncos, 20th overall, and you're going to see Noah Fant play for pride. He's playing for himself in terms of nothing to prove but show who he is. So I really look for him being the versatile tight end that, he's got good hands, didn't catch a touchdown like you said, but, it's his third year with the season, sixth in the third year with the Seahawks, sixth in the league. So I'm looking for him to obviously get more receptions. And there's a reason why they kept him and let go of, Will Dissly and a couple of the other ones. They saw something in him. I'm looking for a big year for Noah Fant here.
Yeah, I still don't know entirely what his role in this offense is going to be, but the biggest thing for me is I'd really just like to see more red zone targets. I mean, you go back to his college tenure at Iowa, and the guy had 11 touchdowns in one season back in 2017, and then he has 0 touchdowns with the Seahawks this past year, and he's really never been a productive red zone threat in the NFL, which has probably been one of the more disappointing aspects of his career. But I think if Grubb is able to scheme him up, get him in some space inside the 20-yard line, it's going to make a big difference for him, and it's going to probably keep him a little happier too if he's getting in the end zone a little bit more.
And one of the more instrumental players on Seattle's defense, or one of the players that I think is going to have the most importance this year, is Julian Love, because last year we saw him really finish the season strong. And Maz, I know late in the year that you were just raving about Julian Love. I heard it in the press box over and over again. Look at the plays that he's making out there. It was night and day difference from the beginning of the season to the second half of the year. And he's playing more of that free safety position, but he can play both spots. This does seem like a really good schematic fit because we know he's from Notre Dame. He's an extremely intelligent guy that can pick things up quickly. And now he's one of the veteran leaders of this football team that can pass on that knowledge to a lot of the young guys that Seattle has in that secondary.
Yeah, Corbin, you said it in the word leader. I think that the awareness that he has on the field, the awareness that he has in the locker room, and also his ability to read and react is why they kept him. They brought him back. And this is somebody that is consistent and that you can rely on. Now, we're not in the team meeting rooms, but Corbin and Connor, I have to guess here that part of the reason why they brought him back over the other ones they could have is this consistency. He always was always where they expect him to be. And I think that's why they brought him back, re-signed him. And I think this was a good move. And he is a leader out there. And as I said, again, on 2 places, on the field and in the locker room. And you've got some young kids young men in the secondary there. And I think he will fit well there.
I think doing the word kids is probably okay.
But everybody, all the players watch your show. I don't want to be going over there on Thursday and going, why you call me a kid when you and Corbin's show? I'm not trying to get into all that.
So, if that happens, you got to make sure to let me know because I'll be enjoying that. But anyway.
See, Connor, you see how he is? Anyways.
I do. It's, I've picked up on it pretty quickly. I can't avoid it. No, we have a lot of fun. But on Julian Love, particularly, it's funny because when I think back to when Seattle acquired him, I just didn't expect that going into his second year with the Seahawks, we were going to be looking at Julian Love as one of the leaders of this team. And now that's what he is because Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs in the safety room specifically are obviously gone. And Julian Love got way too much flack for last season, just in terms of, some uneducated fans obviously chirping at him and being upset about his coverage abilities when in fact he's still for sure the best coverage safety that Seattle has on its roster, especially right now with Diggs gone. So I expect him to step into that role and play a really solid free safety role for the Seahawks. And I don't know how much more room there is to go upwards for Love. I mean, he's already had, back-to-back incredible seasons with over 100 tackles. He had 4 interceptions last year. He's just been great, and I hope that he continues to be in Seahawks uniform for a while, especially if he continues to play well this year.
He's only 26 years old, so this is a big year for him, Maz. It's a chance to get an extension and maybe be a foundational piece in this defense. Wrapping up this latest cluster of 90-man countdown, and the reason we wanted Maz to partake in this is because, Maz, you and I, we have had the privilege to get to watch Byron Murphy II on the practice field. And sometimes there are just certain guys. Last year, Devin Witherspoon was this way for me, where you're just like, the dude just looks different. Like, you can see why he's a top 5 pick. You can just see the traits. You can see the instincts. You can see the physicality. We haven't got to see that physicality yet from Byron Murphy II, but like, there's Byron Murphy II and there's everybody else in that defensive line group. When you're watching how quick he is, I mean, he just looks different out there. And he might have the biggest calves on a human being that I have ever seen.
Fair enough. You pointed those out. First, I was like, and then you were right. Corbin, he lands a little different. I mean, he hits that dummy a little different. You can just see it. We saw, that's the amount that we got to see, but his explosiveness. And to your point, I mean, he's an anchor. Those calves, those quad. I mean, he is an anchor.
He does not miss leg day, Maz.
No, I don't think he's ever missed a leg day, And, Connor, when you're watching them practice, and, you'll get to see this, but it's amazing how he is an anchor, and everybody just it's a fulcrum that kind of moves with him in there, and he is explosive. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun for all of us doing it, and all you 12s out there, just to watch the impact and the explosiveness and power that he has on that D-line.
Yeah, the versatility is going to be a lot of fun, Connor. I can't wait to see what they're going to do with this kid because, I mean, former running back, that got me excited, but you can see the movement skills.
I do want to say that I'm legitimately jealous that y'all have been able to watch him on the practice field, and I have not been able to thus far. I have to hear it secondhand from Corbin, and that's not good enough for me. So I'm going to need to see him in person here pretty soon. But, yeah, watching this guy, you just look at this guy, and he just looks different. And, I wrote for Seahawks on SI today about my expectations for Byron Murphy in his rookie year. And, I don't think he's going to win Rookie of the Year just because of the way the award is often handed out. That's not a knock on Murphy. There hasn't been, it's basically an edge rusher award at this point, especially if they get a whole bunch of sacks. But I think that even if he has a season similar to Jalen Carter or better last year, and I think that's a real possibility, he's going to be in that running. He might finish second, third, and hopefully he wins it. I hope the guy wins it because the last guy to win Defensive Rookie of the Year from the defensive tackle position, guess who? Aaron Donald, 2014. That would be a heck of an award for him to get and be the first defensive tackle to get that since Aaron Donald. It would say a lot about him. I'm just so excited to see this kid on the field. That's really where my statement ends on that.
I love that you mentioned Aaron Donald. And Maz, we got to hear John Schneider. He said he kind of compared him to Aaron Donald during the post-draft thing, and then he kind of took a step back like, wait a second. No, he's not Aaron Donald. Like, he's trying to stop himself. So if he did manage to do that, any hype that is already full steam ahead, like that hype train is going to shoot into the sky. It's going to become a space train if he wins Rookie of the Year at that position.
To Connor's point, though, I think he'll be in the running. Let's face it, it'd be a shock, somewhat of a disappointment if he was not at least in the conversation throughout the season. And that, that's all you can expect, because that would mean that he's having a definitive impact on the Seahawks defense.
Yeah, I'm more worried about him. And I said this in the article, just showing that he's going to be a long-term cornerstone for this defense. That's way more important to me than seeing him get handed that award. So,
Yep.
That should make it a really fascinating storyline to watch, just to see. And again, we're just excited to see this kid out there, especially when the pads come on, and see what he can do in his first training camp practices. Maz, it has been a pleasure. We're going to have you on again at some point in the regular season, and hopefully we'll be diving into some Seahawk victories. We will see you at training camp coming up next week.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
That's Mazvita Marier, and we are going to be chatting at training camp next week, so really looking forward to that. You can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Connor as well at C. John Benintendi. You can follow Maz at Mazvita Marier on X as well. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, Nick Lee and Rob Rang, they are going to be taking the wheel for a Blue Friday show and maybe diving into some pre-training camp fantasy predictions. Should be a really fun show. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Go Hawks.